We're on our 8th mini lesson for literary devices. Remember, literary devices are the terms that we need to know and understand in order to analyze and discuss literature. So let's reflect on where we've been. We first started out with our literary device mini lessons looking at plot. We discussed the American plot structure in the 5 different parts. Then we moved on to conflict, and we talked about internal and external conflicts. Third, we talked about the timing of the story with flashbacks, flash forwards, foreshadowing, sequence. Then next we talked about the feeling of the story. We talked about tone and mood and author's diction. We talked about the setting and the atmosphere, all combined to create that feeling in the story. Our 5th lesson then was on characterization, and we talked about indirect and direct characterization, the way the author develops and creates that character within the story. We talked about flat, round, dynamic, and static characters. We talked about the antagonist, the protagonist. We talked about motivation. So there was a lot that we talked about with characterization. Dialogue was in there. Then our 6th lesson looked at point of view. We talked about omniscient, the all-knowing point of view. We talked about first-person point of view that you have to kind of be skeptical about and maybe really pay attention that the author is being honest with us. And we talked about third-person limited point of view, where we know about how one character feels and thinks and does, but we're limited to that one character. Then last week we moved on to theme, and we looked at the subject of a piece of literature, which can be described in one word. The theme for a piece of literature is described in a sentence or two, and it's based on generalizations. We look at a bunch of little things and we make a generalization up to what that's saying about human nature and human condition, and that's our generalization, that's our theme. We talked about how theme can be seen in different kinds of genres, in poetry, in short stories, and novels. And then we talked about how theme can be a universal theme. So regardless of culture, of time period, of belief systems, there are certain things that are universal to being human that could be a theme, and that's called a universal theme. Now today we're going to look at irony, ambiguity, and satire. First we're going to look at irony. Irony is the difference between what we expect or what seems suitable and what actually happens. Now there's different kinds of irony. The first one is verbal irony. And sometimes I like to think of this as sarcasm. Verbal irony occurs when someone says something but means the opposite. Example: if it's absolutely raining cats and dogs, it's just gross outside, you walk outside and you get drenched, and somebody walks by you and says, "Nice day." Well, we know that they don't really literally mean nice day. They're using verbal irony. They're saying one thing, but they mean another. Our second type is situational irony, which refers to an event that is contrary to or opposite of what we expect to happen. Example: the fire station burns down. It's kind of funny, but that would be situational irony. It's something we wouldn't expect to happen. The winner of a wrestling match is the weakest team member. Oftentimes we get situational irony for real in sporting events, where you have the underdog coming through at the end, and we're all rooting for him, but coming through at the end and winning the whole thing. That's situational irony. Then our third type is dramatic irony. And dramatic irony takes place when we know what's going to happen to a character, but the character doesn't know. So this is something that you perceive within a novel that we read, a short story that we read, a movie we watch. even sometimes a poem that we read. For example, Margot opens the door to a garage that we know, as the audience, is full of snakes. That's dramatic irony. Or we know, but the robber does not know, that the hotel that they're about to rob is hosting a police convention. This would be dramatic irony. So our three types of irony are verbal irony, situational irony, and dramatic irony. Ambiguity is a little bit different. Ambiguity is the quality that allows something to be interpreted in several different or conflicting ways. So if you and a friend have completely different ideas about an ambiguous character or an ambiguous ending to the story, you might both be right. And that's what ambiguity is. There is no single way to interpret an ambiguous story. That's part of the fun. And if we get time, there's a story that we're going to read in class that has a very ambiguous ending. And it's kind of a fun story. So hopefully we'll get time to do that. And then satire. Satire is a type of writing that ridicules in order to reveal a weakness. The ridicule could be directed at one person, at a group of people, at humanity at large. It could be an attitude or a failing. It could be directed at a social institution. So there's lots of different ways that satire can be taken. Most satires are an attempt to talk us into believing something or doing something. Satires do this by pointing out how the opposite point of view or action is ridiculous or laughable. Satires often use exaggeration, overstating something to make it look worse than it is. So we'll look at literature that is a satire, poking fun at something to make a point, to show a weakness. Oftentimes we see this in political cartoons, and I want to jump over here and look at this one because it's something that just happened like this summer. And here we have a Native American priest, and he is marrying this couple. It's two men. And it says, "And do you think Obama will be remembered for more than being African American?" And of course the men, as if they're in a wedding, say, "I do." And the point that's being made is that the rights for gay marriage has happened under the Obama administration. So we can see here a political satire that is focusing on a policy that became law under the Obama administration. So we have looked at irony, three types of irony being verbal irony, situational irony, and dramatic irony. We've looked at ambiguity, interpreting things in different ways, but they might both be right. It's ambiguous. And then we've looked at satire, writing that ridicules something to reveal a weakness. Okay, so now you're going to go ahead and answer the responses on Canvas. Bring any questions that you may have to class. And we'll read some good stories over this one. See you in class.